count. Because I really love to.
Welcome back to another episode of the GC Informer. I am Snowy, otherwise known as Count Frackula. It was supposed to be Max today, but he's let me down. Can't get the staff. We will start today by talking about a game that you must have heard of by now, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. It is incredibly popular. It's sold 8 million units just on Steam. That's 8.3 million units actually. And it's getting loot boxes. So, you know, that's a yay and a nay from me. And now, it's got a new record. It's overtaken Dota 2 in top concurrent players, sort of like the recent top concurrents. It's actually like the most played game on Steam, which is frightening and amazing. Its peak yesterday, as of recording, was 877,000, which after a little bit of back and forth, that was the higher number than Dota 2 could manage yesterday, which is that's amazing. The all-time high record of concurrence still goes to Dota 2 at 1.3 million players on at once, but this is still very, very amazing. Like, that's just mind-blowing to see how popular this game is and still is. Speaking of Dota 2 though, Dota 2 is getting review bombed on Steam. For those of you who don't know, review bombing is the practice of just loads of people dogpiling negative reviews in response to something bad happening around the game. A popular example of this of recent times is the review bombing of Grand Theft Auto 5 on Steam. After the whole modding controversy, it still actually only lies at a 6 out of 10 on various sites now, which is astonishing that it's still there. So you might be wondering what the reason is for the Dota 2 review bomb. Is it perhaps that there's a new content patch that people are unhappy with? Have Valve said something awful or done something awful regarding Dota 2? No. The real reason for the review bombing is that a lot of people seem to be blaming Dota 2 for the lack of news and development in regards to Half-Life 3. In some ways this may well be true because Dota 2 is a huge money maker through its microtransaction system. A lot of people blame Dota 2's money revenue stream for there not being any development in Half-Life because they don't have any incentive to do it. The argument here is that because obviously Dota 2 makes so much money and that Half-Life 3 wouldn't make anywhere near as much money as Dota 2 would make in, say, a few months, then why should they bother making Half-Life 3 or even single-player games in general, or just games and just release that, like more updates for Dota 2 and keep that fresh. Whether or not you agree with that or I agree with that is a completely separate entity to whether or not it's actually true. And I welcome you to debate in the comments whether or not you think that's the case, whether or not Dota 2 is responsible for Half-Life 3 not happening. I think it's sort of a mix. It's not entirely true, but I also don't think it's entirely false. And please discuss in a pleasant manner what you think. In a slightly, I wouldn't say off-topic note because it's still game-related, but slightly different to what we normally cover. In 2014, there was a study published in a psychological paper. I don't know the name of the exact paper, but it was a published piece of research which was about video game violence. This research claimed that people who had played shooter games such as Resident Evil 4, which was a specific example they used, and the shooting gallery on Wii Play, again, very specific example, were much better at shooting guns in real life, after proper instruction of course, than people who played other types of games such as the example that they used, which was Super Mario Galaxy. While at face value this study might make sense, and in fact it did, well, it seemed to have statistically significant evidence towards its conclusion, and it got published in a paper, which means it's like sort of taken as read at the very least, and it's there. Papers that get published in these kinds of journals are usually peer-reviewed. However, there seems to be some sort of question as to whether or not this paper was peer-reviewed at all, and it was in fact in 2015 questioned quite heavily, and a lot of the research methods were questioned, and as such the paper actually got retracted in 2015. Now, you might be thinking, why are you bringing this up now? This was 2 years ago that the last thing that happened with it happened, so what's going on now? And it is this. The researcher, or one of the researchers, the co-author of the paper, who happens to have a very similar, if not the same name to the new Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, has had her PhD rescinded from her by the University of Ohio. I do apologise, I made a slight mistake. The retraction happened earlier this year, and the whole removing of her PhD does seem to be a whole thing that's the result of an inquiry into this particular study. While the co-author has actually been cleared of misconduct towards this particular study, they still decided to revoke her PhD on the grounds of like everything that's happened around it. And it's a bit of a shame to a point, but at the same time, if you're going to get a paper published in a supposedly reputable scientific journal, maybe get it peer reviewed just to make sure that your methods were fine first. And finally, because Max is not here, I'm going to beat him to some news. FORTNITE. Just going to have to check actually. I'm assuming not, so I will carry on. What was I talking about? FORTNITE! Yes, I'm beating him to the punch slightly on this little bit of news regarding the first proper update to the game. While I'm sure in his capacity on the review team, Max will have a little bit more of in-depth discussion and commentary upon this whole update, because that's how he's formatting this, and I quite enjoy that. Go and watch the first impressions of that if you like, it's on our channel. The first update will include several new things, including a new game mode, which is basically a sort of escalation type thing, where you collect resources during the day, get attacked at night. I think that's the standard mode anyway, but it's a sort of more, it escalates more as opposed to works on levels. So you just keep going until you die, I think is the way that they're doing it. These levels also have modifiers. They're specials. Like it's called a, what's the level called? It's called Survive the Storm, and there are special storms which can give you buffs, which I find that's quite a weird thing. I don't know how they're going to implement that. Whether or not you have to sort of be in the area of that particular storm to do it, I'm not sure. It'd be quite an interesting thing to look at. They are also adding a new weapons set, which is the hydraulic weapons. It'll include all sorts of hydraulic-y type weapons, and also a new hero to play as. In fact, several new heroes to play as, and apparently some new art for a particular base, so how nice. Good. I think this is, I look at FORTNITE, and I personally think it's not my kind of game, but I can understand why people would like it. I also don't really want to play it because it's got microtransactions in it, or it does have microtransactions in it, but at the same time, cool. This looks like it's going to be updated fairly frequently. It looks like they actually care about the game and they want it to succeed, so I hope that this game does well. I really do. So that's it for this episode of the GC Informer. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a like, subscribe, share and a comment, whatever you fancy. And if you want to join any of our social media, you can in the description below. I would say I have a YouTube channel you can watch in the end cards, but no, there's no point. Nothing's been posted on my YouTube channel at the moment, so that'll have to wait. And otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the news, and tomorrow will be Vox doing the news, and I won't be back until next week, so unlucky, you poor things. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon for more news.